What's good? My name is VANIMUS, and today I'm going to be working on some dark trap samples and dark melodic loops for my loop kit, All My Chains Are Snakes. In this project in particular, I'm really trying to use almost exclusively free to access instruments so that if you guys mess with any of the sounds that I'm using and that you hear in these loops, you guys can access and use them yourselves in your own loops, in your own beats. And yeah, if you guys mess with any of the loops that I create in this video, all of them will be available for download in the description below. So yeah, sit back, relax, and let's get into it. Alright, so when I get started creating my dark trap and dark melodic loops, what I tend to like to do is to start with a chord progression, and I like to build out that chord progression using a very simple but vibey type of piano. So the piano that I'm going to be recommending for you all today is the free Quiet Piano by Quiet Music. It's one of my favorite free piano plugins, and the preset that I'm going to be using mostly today is going to be Restless Moment. So what I have here is just a very simple 1/4 chord progression in the key of D minor. D minor is one of the most common and traditional scales and keys in the genre of dark trap, and 1/4 is one of the most common chord progressions. So this is just what a plain 1/4 chord progression sounds like in the key of D minor. So that might not sound very familiar to you, and that's because in almost all of the cases when we're using this chord progression, we see that we're using the first inversion of the 4th chord. So in simple terms, that just means that I'm going to bring down this D4 down to D3, or bring down the D by an octave. And in this genre of dark trap, we tend to see very simple chord progressions, so this is more than enough actually to create a whole song around. What I'm going to try to do is to experiment with just shaping the sound and the vibe of this chord progression more, just by breaking apart the chords a little bit and by adding different octaves of these chords. Alright, so next I'm just going to use this. I'm going to keep this as it is for now. I'm going to see if I can add either, first of all, let's try to just use a different type of sound and see if it evokes any more melodic ideas. So I'm going to be using Vital, which is a very convenient and very powerful free synthesizer plugin. Alright, so this is what I got now. It's really simple. All I'm doing is playing the same notes on a different synth and layering the sounds together. And so let's just try to switch it up a little bit just in the second synth layer and see how that goes. I'm going to go back into probably Vital and look for just I'm just going to look for a sound that I resonate with, and using that sound try to just literally just mess around and find a starting note for a melody. Alright, so I'm still in the process of finding the right instruments and melodies to go along with these first two tracks and really advance and develop this loop in the direction that I want to. But one thing that I would suggest as a piece of advice for any of y'all who are making loops, especially if you guys are stuck, is to focus not just only on what you're trying to add, but what you already have going on. You know, ideally in my philosophy of music, I want everything to flow naturally. I don't want to force anything. I want the chord progression I have to automatically inspire the melody that I hear in my head that goes along with it. I want the sound selection I've chosen to automatically give me an idea of the instrument that pairs really well with it and that resonates with it and advances this loop as a whole, or whatever piece of music that you're trying to work on. So the piece of advice that I would give to you is not be afraid to work backwards in order to make some real progress in finishing and advancing a loop. So I'm gonna put that piece of advice into practice here by, instead of just listening to all these tracks together, because it sounds, I'm having a little bit of a problem or an issue with how kind of cluttered and messy it sounds. I'm gonna put that piece of advice into practice just by muting this second track and in essence just removing what I, or part of what I already have, in order to see if what is remaining still fits together. Alright, so one thing that I'm seeing in the EQ here is that there's a little bit of overlap between the first two tracks. And again, when I play these tracks together without the second track, I am messing with how it sounds. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to completely change the instrument that I'm using for the second track. Although in a vacuum, I think it sounds nice. You know, without any of these other tracks, I think it sounds kind of cool, but it's just not serving this track. And if I really like this instrument, I can always use it in a different loop. But for the overall structure of this loop, it's not really doing its job. It's not really serving me the way that I want to. So I'm actually going to use Spitfire Labs to look for a little bit of a different instrument to use here. Alright, so this is the instrument that I ended up choosing. So this is an instrument that I definitely wouldn't reach for off of first glance, especially when it's solo, but in the context of the mix, I really like how it sounded. I think it just filled out a certain gap in frequency and a certain gap in texture that just sounds really good in the context of this loop. So let's listen to it all together now. Alright, so I think that overall this first loop is pretty solid to me. I don't think that it really needs much more in the way of, you know, counter melodies or adding more layers to it, because I feel like the vibe is pretty established. So I'm going to call on this one. I'm going to do some of my own cleaning up and post-processing for you guys who want to download it. But yeah, I'm pretty set and pretty satisfied with this first loop. So let's move on to the next one. Alright, so that's what we have going on for this, the backbone of the second loop here. And so the thing that I really want to stress upon y'all here, especially in this type of genre of like dark trap and dark instrumentals and loops, is the power of octaves, especially if you tend to use a lot of piano, a lot of classic pianos. The lower register of pianos is such a powerful and such a rich texture that, you know, it's great to really take advantage of. So from here, I know that I have a lot filling up this lower register and these lower frequencies. and the nature of this instrument and the quality of this texture is such that it's very wide, right? It takes up a lot of space. So I'm going to try to counteract it most likely with something that is quite sharp and quite clean in comparison. But first of all, I am just hearing a layer of like choir vocals on top of this, so I'm going to try to use Spitfire Audio's labs to yeah, just layer it with some type of vocal noise. Alright, now let's try to add some type of melody that has a kind of upper register or relatively higher frequency range, and also is a little bit more clear and cuts through this mix. Alright, so I feel like it's still missing a little bit, so I'm going to try to add some textures or just effects, and also play around with trying to resample and reverse things and see how it sounds. Alright, so far, I think it's fine as it is. I am not super sure about this melody right now, so I'm actually going to double the length of this loop, and I'm just going to make the first half have none of this melody. So just in case, if anyone who wants to use this loop just wants to use these chords without anything added, they can do that with the same file just by looping this first section. And if they want to use this instrument, they can do so in the second half of the loop. So the reason why I'm taking it off the grid right now is just because, especially with these reverse types of melodies, usually with a normal instrument we have a certain transient that marks the beginning of that note, but whenever we are reversing that that audio file, of course, the transient is going to happen at the end and the tail is going to happen at the beginning. So we want to make sure that the presence of the note, even when reversed, is occurring where we want it to occur. So in this case, I felt like the note didn't come in until a little bit later than what I would prefer. So I just brought all of these audio files up a little bit. Alright, so that's about where I'm going to leave this loop for now. I really like the chords and the textures and instruments that we have chosen to represent the chords in this loop. And we also get to play around with a little bit of reversing, which of course always imparts its own flavor and type of vibe into a loop. So yeah, that's great. I'm going to do some cleaning up and processing of this loop on my own time. Yeah, but for now, let's move on to the next one. Alright, so for this loop, I'm kind of interested in trying out this new slightly different chord progression, which is the 1/4/2 chord progression in the context of dark trap types of genres. So I'm going to build that out really quick, and instead of using D minor again, I'm trying to use A minor because it's one of my favorite keys. So yeah, I'm going to build that out real quick, and let me get back to you in a second. Alright, so this is the 1/4/2 chord progression in the key of A minor. So if your ear is anything like mine, this is not an immediately really vibey chord progression to me, at least. It doesn't immediately off the bat inspire me, but this is why it's so important to play with your chord inversions. So if you guys don't know what that means, all it means in a very simple sense is to just change the order of the notes that represent the chord. So instead of A, C, E, I can bring down the E 1 octave, and from a lower frequency to higher frequency, or lower pitch to higher pitch, it becomes EAC. So I'm going to do that with the 4 chord here. I'm going to take what's called the first inversion of the 4 chord and bring down this top note by an octave. And instead of sounding like this, taking the first inversion makes these first 2 chords sound like this. And to me, this is a lot more just interesting. It resonates with me and my sound a lot more. And part of the reason why is because of the fact that now we're sharing a root note within these 2 chords. The lowest pitch is going to be the same note. But yeah, play around with your inversions, because it's crazy how much just changing the order of these notes can completely shift the vibe of a chord. So I'm going to do the same thing now. I'm trying to find an inversion for this chord, this 2 chord, into something else, because I'm just not really in love with it yet. See, on one hand, whereas using the inversion for this chord allows this one note to be remaining the same between these first 2 chords, I feel like having both of these notes here, as well as the B, which is not too far, it's kind of just filling in the empty space in a way, between the D and A of the chord prior, it just sounds very similar. So what I'm going to try to do is actually raise this B an octave. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to bring down, this is the 4 chord. So now these chords are going to be of the same inversion. I'm going to do the same thing here. And I'm going to try to see how it sounds with A instead. Yeah, I'm really loving that. It sounds like it's, I don't know, it just sounds a little bit unusual, but yeah, I'm vibing with that. So I'm going to try to find a synth for it for me right now. What sounds about right is some type of really energetic synth, not really this more low energy type of instrument. So yeah, I'll be right back. Yeah, so I Yeah, so I honestly have no idea what I did in terms of a music theory context right now, at least immediately upon listening to this, what I did with these last two chords here, but I honestly do not care. I vibe with it. It's something that I heard in my ear, so it's going to my DAW now. I'm just going to change up this instrument because, yeah, there's something about it that's not ideal to me, but I do like this type of vibe that we have going on right now. So, yeah, let's see what we can get going. Alright, so this is about what I got going on for this chord progression right now. It's giving me some type of Utopia Travis Scott vibes. Alright, so let's see if I can pair that with a little bit more of dark trap, hip hop inspired sound. I'm thinking about going for a choir again, but we'll see. Let's see if I can add some interesting top notes and make it a little bit more functional rather than just being a layer on top of the existing melody. Yeah, so I'm really messing with that. Alright, so I'm going to separate this top melody into a different track so I can treat it with audio effects a little bit differently. I'm going to take off this top melody from these chords. So these are textures that it's going to take some work for them to kind of come together just because they're so different. But I think that if I put in the work to kind of really shape them together, it'll sound kind of fire. Having this type of synth with a very dark choral sound. Let's just listen to these two tracks together. Yeah, so I'm kind of messing with that for now. But yeah, I need to kind of think about whether or not this voice can stand on its own up against this synth. I think it might actually work better if I simplify this. Okay. So let's try now to incorporate or bring back this track and see how it sounds. I'm thinking about actually just getting rid of this here, which would completely change the vibe of this loop to remove this. Yeah, let's see. I feel like some instrument changes are necessary here. Although I really do like the idea of kind of putting these two vibes together in these different instruments. I'm gonna try and further simplify these chords and make it just like basically match this and see if that kind of allows for more breathing room that, yeah, is sufficient to allow these instruments to sit together. Let's do some carving out with EQ. Just some really simple stuff for now. Yeah, let's actually now add something which might seem a little bit counterintuitive, but what I'm feeling is that, I mean, even as it is right now, it feels a little empty. Yeah, honestly, I might come back to this one, but right now I'm kind of vibing with how it is. I think it still feels a little detached, but that might be something that can be fixed with some mixing. I'm gonna try to see if I can add some last minute textures or something to really glue everything together, but yeah. Alright, so the last thing that I'm gonna try to do is change up a little bit of the rhythm here because it feels very steady like a march right now. I'm actually also going to boost the temperature, not the temperature, the rhythm a bit, the tempo, and yeah, I'm gonna try and mess with this melody a little bit. Alright, so I think that's where I'm gonna leave this last loop for now. I'm really loving the way it sounds, and after I mix it, clean it up, and process it, I'm sure it's gonna sound super dope. But yeah, if you guys mess with this loop or any of the 3 loops that I created today, you guys can check out the description below for a download link that comes with the free edition of my All My Chains Are Snakes loop kit. Thank you all so much for sticking with me to the end of this video. I hope you all mess with some of the sounds that we worked with today and can create something of your own with them. If you guys do, please hit me up, yeah, and leave any feedback, any ideas of what you want to hear from me, and see me too in the comments below. Yeah, I appreciate every single one of you. Peace.